Let's give you, I'm going to give you a real brief history of Henry. In 1977, I'll tell you a personal story. I had just been hired for the Lake Forest School District as an art teacher up there. And I was down at the Rehoboth Art League. They were having one of their annual Stonefet shows. And I went down, and I really didn't know that Mr. Progar then was going to be there. And I walked up, and sure enough, there he was sitting underneath one of the pines, and he had his numerous paintings on the snow fence. So I went up to him and introduced myself. He said, "I know who you are. I had you when you were in 7th and 8th grade. You were at Spicer." Well, first I was in awe that he remembered me. And then we talked for a little bit. And he said, I said, "Well, Mr. Progar, it was very nice talking." He says, "Don't call me Mr. Progar. You're one of us now, and I'll be Hank." So that was like a validation that I had accomplished something that was worthy of Mr. Progar's compliment. So tonight, I'm going to honor that memory by calling him Hank. Hopefully, I can stay in character the whole time. Hank was a remarkable person. Very personable, loved people, but most importantly, he loved to teach and he loved to paint. He was phenomenal. Hank could enter a room and command the attention of a room simply by his presence. And he was most comfortable when he was with his friends and his family. It's a great picture. We wanted to put this in. It's a great picture of Hank painting on site. He loved to paint on site, and that was his main area of expertise. He enjoyed the outdoors. These were two previous exhibitions and presentations that the Society had done. And there's the man in his younger years. That's the Hank Progar that I remember as a middle school student, and many of you will know. And there's an even younger Hank applying his craft. And if you look at the easel, it's one of the studio easels, and you see it? Oh, wrong button. If you look right there, when I started teaching art in Laurel High School, those same schools were still there. And they were as uncomfortable now as they were back then. This is one of Hank's classes that he taught to members of the public. People would sign up and they would go out and paint on site. As you can see, they're very intent in what they're doing. And typically, from what I understand, Hank would also paint, and people would come over and look at his painting and go back to theirs, and then he would visit them, and they would talk about the progress of their painting. Helen, what a beautiful picture of you, and the lovely poinsettias that Hank had painted. I wanted to talk about Helen. This week, I had the distinct pleasure and privilege of talking with Helen for about 45 minutes. I called her, and we just talked. I wanted to know more about the man, the husband, the father, and the artist that she knew in Hank Progar. And she was very forthcoming. It was a lovely talk, Helen. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
And I also want to introduce Frank. Frank and Helen are a couple been married for many, many years, and they've been wonderful caretakers of Hank's legacy, his artistic legacy. Helen, when Ned and Norma Jean went up to visit Frank and Helen, they shared a notebook of photographs that Hank had compiled of the different works that he had done over the years. And I found a very interesting fact about Hank in my talk with him. He produced over 2,000 paintings in his career. He had a 30-year career. The math says that he was producing a painting, a little over a painting every week for 30 years. So that just tells you how prolific he was. This is a typical studio easel that he would have used in the studio. Thank goodness he didn't have to carry that one on site. They're pretty heavy. And I here to tell you, when I went to Laurel High School, it was Still waiting. One way. This is not Hank Progar's bag of tools. This is an example. The medium that he used predominantly was palette knife. And then Norma Jean and I were talking one night, and I said, well, there's a different knife for every application, how you want to work a painting. And I said, you know, like if you, wrong button. If you look, a palette knife like this may be used, my thumbs are too big. That palette knife would have probably been used for the sky, and these smaller ones would have been used for detail work that you're going to see in the paintings to come. You wouldn't take this to try to do detail work. It's like taking a putter out of your golf bag and using it on the driving range when you're ready to hit. There was a specific knife for each application. I just want you to take this painting in, because this truly represents what Hank Progar was all about, his style. It's called impasto. It's a gradual and monumental buildup of paint. It's very textural. I want you to be honest now. How many of you have ever touched a Henry Progar painting? Thank you. We know we're not supposed to do that because our paints need oils. But it's so inviting and so intriguing, you can't go by one without doing it.
I got spanked for that.
Let's talk about what was going on in the art world during Hank's career. In the late 60s and 50s and 60s, there was a movement going on called abstract expressionism. And this is a Mark Rothko painting. Do you see any similarities? Okay. Another contemporary, Andy Warhol, and his pop art series of various subject matters, Marilyn Monroe. I don't see the similarity there. And then we have the quintessential abstract expressionist, Jackson Pollock. How many of you have ever seen a Jackson Pollock painting before? How many of you know how he did it? He did it just like it looks. He simply took paint, and although it's built up very similar to the impasto technique by the layering of different color paints, but these were his contemporaries. And one thing about Hank painted what Hank wanted to paint. Am I not right, Helen?
Yes.
Thank you. He painted what he wanted to paint. Now I want to talk about, and this is speculation on my part, conjecture on my part, but having gone through an art education curriculum in college, and I know there's some other art educators in the building who are also practicing artists, the one thing you're going to find is that even if it's subconscious, the artists, the masters that you studied that precede you, you can't help but pick up some of those influences in your own work. So this is my opinion of who I think may have inspired Hank in some way. This is Manet, and this is a series, he did a series of water lilies. And I think as we go through this retrospective, you'll see why I think he influenced Hank. This is Van Gogh. I think you can see, just from looking at the heavy application of the paint. The other thing with the Impressionists, they were all about the juxtaposition with light and how it affected this stuff, capturing a moment in time. That's what the Impressionists were. This is Pissarro, the nocturnal scene of London. Another Impressionist, trying to catch that moment in time, but also dealing with light. And then, of course, we have Picasso. I don't think there's an artist alive today that hasn't been influenced by Picasso in some way. We'll see some examples. So what I want you to do, having seen who I think may have influenced Hank, see if you see those influences as we go through. I want to take you through the different mediums that he used, from pencil, graphite, through charcoal, and an ink, watercolor, and fine oils, which I believe was his favorite medium. This is a fully rendered graphite drawing of the Hollywood Berry from the north side. This wasn't a quick sketch. This wasn't a study for a later painting. You can tell that this is Hank wanted to sit down and do a fully rendered drawing. This one, I believe, I don't know the history of Helen. If you do, if you share, it would be great. I think Hank was simply sitting down at a coffee shop somewhere, had his pen with him, and was sitting there with friends and decided just to do a quick sketch.
Could be.
It's called Coffee Talk. Very quick, charcoal. And this is, it's dated 1950. Glenn, can you read that in the corner? 56? What is it?
52.
52. Well, that was the year that Hank came to Laurel, 1952. Helen, was he fresh out of college when he came to Laurel?
Yeah, he had been in the service,
Okay.
and then he came here from Penn State, right?
Right from Penn State. So I'm almost thinking that this could have been, it's an etching that he did maybe in one of his printmaking classes that he brought with him. It's a nude. Do we see any influence maybe here? Maybe going back to something with Picasso?
Yeah.
No, this is a pen and ink or brush and ink wash drawing that he did of the Hasty Barns across from Horsey's Pond. Very quick. I think he had his sketch pad or he had a piece of his paper on a board and simply sat down and did a very quick sketch. The next one is the very same scene, but it's much more delineated and it's much more refined than a quick sketch. He was a master draftsman. There's another quick sketch of one of his favorite subjects. I'm going to sit down now. This is the Betty Conaway, am I right there? Down at Valiant Fertilizer. If you look there, that concrete building is still standing there on the front street. Very quick, on the site, sketch. Indeed. Now we're going to move into Hank's watercolors. And what I really want to talk to you about, Hank always took you on a journey in his paintings. He knew exactly where he wanted to take you. He would guide your eye through the painting. He was a master of composition. So what I want you to look at is how he used angular and diagonals to absolutely direct your eye. I often wondered, when Hank went on site, sit down on the bay somewhere, did he walk around for a period of time until he found exactly the right site? Did he already have it pre-planned from a previous visit? But he was a master at directing the viewer's eye. If you look at this one, this is a lithograph that's been watercolored. You can watch the diagonals. He goes here, 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 here. He just leads your eye right into the painting. He's in complete control. This is a Sussex County farm scene. We don't know exactly where it is. But once again, if you look, half of this painting is void of almost everything. But it works because of the way he leads your eye into the composition here. And also the way he leads your eye with the shadows in the snow. This is a Blue Hen Farm. And what I love about this painting is the fence. Once again, the diagonals. Hank loved roads. He loved dirt roads, as you're going to see through this presentation. This is the pepper farm. The silos are still standing in wintertime. This is the spear farm. All right. For those of you who may not know, that's a sweet potato house. And what I really want you to pay attention here is this wheat field here, because we're going to talk about it later in the presentation. It dominates, but at the same time, it's not in direct competition with what he's trying to show here in the farm. This is the Warrington farm out by Pepper Box. It's called soybeans. Quick watercolor sketch, pen and ink watercolor. But once again, he's controlling your eye, how he's leading you into the picture. This is a quick watercolor study of the mill down by the mill dam where the old dam was. And I want you to pay particular attention to it because you're going to see it in a different meeting later in the presentation. Hank was not afraid to do the figure at all. This is any typical barn. And Jesse, when I look at this, I think of your barn because I can almost see it inside your barn. Just a nice random watercolor rendering. Now we're going to move into his oils. And what I really want you to pay attention to is he loved water. He was a master at doing reflections. And he had a God-given hand to be able to paint different textures using the palette knife and brush. I want to talk to you real quickly about Hank, and this is very subjective, and you're going to have a different opinion than me. You're going to have a different opinion than the person sitting next to you. As with any artist, you have masterworks. Those paintings that transcend the artist, that are true masterful works. In my opinion, this is one of Hank's masterpieces. The change of the texture from the oyster shells on the beach to the boat, to the water, to the shanty on the land. I just think compositionally and technically it's one of his masterpieces. And then again, you also have here a very, very simple subject. When I was talking with Helen, we had a conversation, and she indicated and shared with me that Hank was not a production painter. He didn't just produce works to sell. When he took on a painting, he put as much effort in that painting as he did in any of the others. This is a great harbor scene. The shadow you see up there is from the lamp above. Another wonderful painting, just the scope and the panoramic view of the marsh and the house in the background. Once again, he's taking you on a journey when you enter this painting. Seascapes. Back in the early to mid 60s, Hank, Helen, and the kids went down during the summers and lived in Ocean City. And Hank held various classes for youngsters and also adults, and did a great deal of painting while he was down here. This is the Fenwick Lighthouse. But look, you can feel you can feel the grass blowing. Another harbor scene. This is the Henlopen Hotel on Rehoboth. This is a close-up. This is, in my opinion, another one of his masterful works, and it's that because of the different textures he was able to produce. The sky, the rusting metal cans, the wood, sand, the grass. This is a close-up. A close-up from that painting. Another close-up. Yeah. How many of you took it kind of like, oh, yeah. I think this is one of the best paintings that I've ever seen of Hank's. And the really interesting thing is the lighting. This is the light. It's almost like the skies are opening up and this ray of light's coming in. I mean, this is masterful. The reflections here in the water, the different details, and This was a palette knife and brush combination. Just a beautiful painting. And we've been trying to figure out, is this the roads of Trap Pond? Is it out by Portsville? But wow, what a great painting of the forest and the dirt road, which Hank loved. But what I really want you to look here, do you see the influence of the Impressionists here, where they're trying to capture a moment in time with the shadows and the lights coming through? Another rural scene. Don't think it's around here, it's a little hilly for Sussex County. Another beautiful road scene. He loved dirt roads, and I think it was he loved the ruts. He loved painting the ruts in the road. This is the Johnson farm.
That's the one I touched.
Oh. And there's your fingerprint right there. But once again, Hank's leading your eye. Most times when, if you're doing a portrait of a building, normally it's center. No, Hank painted it the way he wanted to. Just the whole farm he wanted to show. He wanted to take you in. This is the Carey farm. Once again, we have this great dirt road leading you into the painting. Pay special attention to these corn stalks. You're going to see why in a few minutes. But once again, typical Sussex County home, beautiful barn that's been weathered and rendered in such a convincing way. Hollybrook area from the south side. This is the south side. The pencil drawing was from the north. But once again, Hank's in control. How does he lead your eye? He uses a barbed wire. And then he comes back in. He just gradually leads your eye into the painting. He does this wonderful rendering of a weathered art, of the weathered post. This is a farm, we're not sure where it is. But if you remember what we talked about the wheat fields before in the watercolor, this is how he would render them with the palette knife, showing the shadows and the highlights.
Right, I know where that is.
You know where that is?
That's Mr. Allen Hitchens' farm.
Can you say it louder?
Mr. Alvin
Mr. Allen
Hitchens'
Hitchens'
farm.
farm.
Mr. Allen Hitchin?
Alvin.
Alvin.
Yeah. That chicken house made down the back. House was on the side.
So the owner in this room now knows where that painting's from, which I know they wanted to try to find out, so thank you guys. Hank wanted to show a tree. And he picked a canvas and probably hand stretched it to get exactly the angle that he wanted. And in the background is the Hastings Barns. The next painting again is the Hastings Barn, and Hank had a visitor. That's his son Gary. And when I was talking to Helen, she said that she and the kids periodically would go on site with Henry and spend the day with him, have lunch and everything. And Hank being such a social person, he loved having the family. And when he was out on his own, Helen said typically on a Saturday he would get up and pack lunch and he would take off and he would come back and they'd talk about the day, the typical family. It was just Dad going out to paint. And he was completely supported by his family. Helen shared that while Hank was very social, when he was out by himself painting, people would always stop by. You see Hank Progar out painting, people would stop. And he would enjoy the conversation for a little while. But eventually, enough was enough. And he was back to the business and he wanted to work on his painting. And he would kind of politely, send people on their way. Same view, minus Gary, slightly different at the Hastings farm, on Horse's Farm. This is 4th Street in Laurel. Wow, has that street changed since that painting was done? But, you know, Hank loved doing the structures around town, as you're going to see during this series. This is Market Street, downtown Market Street at night. Did we see any influence? Oh, I think maybe. Maybe. Hank also did commissions. This was Tony and Wayne Culver's house on Culver Drive. And this was Ned's grandfather's home on Pine Street. Another masterful work. Old Christ Church, but from a view that I don't think anyone had ever painted this view before Hank. You know, everybody always wanted to see the front doors, the cross on the top, you know, and Hank took an entirely different approach when he did this. See the little fence here? I mean, and the play of light here. I mean, the shadows, everything. Once again, he's leading your eye with this fence. But you know, here's this monolithic tree trunk. So beautiful, the bark of a pine tree, so convincing that he was able to accomplish with a palette knife. St. Philip's, a while back, but probably done from a postcard. But what I find intriguing about this painting is look at the sky, how ominous it is, but look at the trees. The wind's blowing. You can tell a storm is on its way. And there in the center is your respite, the church. With the ferry, once again with the kids fishing. You remember the quick watercolor that he did earlier? Well, this is his finished oil of the mill. Bacon's Mill, we feel this is a conceptualized painting since the mill was gone so long ago. It was commissioned by Ms. Nan Fuchs, and we think that it was probably either maybe an old photograph or something that the description was given to Hank to complete. This is the back end of Horsey's Pond. Chipman Mill, before its demise. Barron's Creek Mills out of Mardella. But look at the waterfall, how convincing that is. So you get the texture of the water, the weathered barn look of the building, and then if there was one thing Hank Progar could paint, he could paint leaves on a tree. He was masterful at that, being so convincing. And you're going to see some examples later on. Now I think we're starting to approach some of Hank's favorite subjects. And those were the swamps, the ponds, the cypress trees, the cypress knees, all those areas around Laurel that inspired him. Once again, the heavy impasto, the application of paint, the convincing rendering of the water. I mean, I don't think you could throw a bob or go fishing right now. Another one of his woodland scenes with the river. And this time has an eager. Beautiful use of light. I mean, amazing, especially when you look down in this area, how convincing this land is here, but also the reflection qualities here in those trees here. Another masterful work by Hank Progar. I mean, This is one of those you just want to look at and just take in the different areas. I mean, the light, the way the light is here, the textures of the trees, even all that stuff you can find in a pond or a stream that just kind of lays on top because the water's still. And then the use of the light in the background, you see the light filtering through the trees. You can see here on this pastoral scene, this heavy application of paint here. But once again, you lead your eye back into the painting. Tour de force. Beautiful. Rusticated run. As was this one. This is rusticated. This is in the spring or summer. This is in the wintertime, just down a little further than where the other one took place. I can tell you as a painter, snow is one of the hardest things to make convincing. And you scoop up a snowball out of that. And the next one, even though it's not local, masterful. Look at the stream, look at the shadows in the stream, and the play of light on the snow. A moment in time frozen, literally. Trap pond. How many ever took a rowboat out of a trap pond? Absolutely. You probably know right where that is, where it was. And then Ellis Pond. This one there's a couple, I want you to pay attention to this area here. It's not that noticeable right now, and I want you to take notice of this area here. That's what I was talking about when I said he was a master at painting leaves. And if you look at this area, you can see where the paint was actually mixed right on the canvas, down in the grass. But to me, this is unbelievable. The way in the background, he was able to move light through the trees. Interesting to be able to see the different textures of two types of trees. The oak on one side and the birch on the other. But also how he was able to completely illustrate the leaves on the floor. We're not sure if this was one of his students or if it was a self-portrait. This is a palette knife painting. And this is Helen in her wedding dress. And there's an interesting story here. Shortly after their marriage, Hank began a painting of Helen in her wedding dress. And he completed it on their 25th wedding anniversary. But Helen never gave up hope. She never gave up passion. And Garrett and Paige bought the frame and they presented it to Helen on their 25th wedding anniversary.
It's almost like the shoemaker's children.
Governor Carl. This was done with brush and palette knife combination. Palette knife portrait. Palette knife study. Figure study. And then this is Trap Pond. Are there any confessions in the room? No? No. Hank also had a huge sense of humor. And after he painted it, and then he introduced the nudes on his own, supposedly without any models. So, but when you look at this painting, you see a sense of humor, but you also see some influences here. You can look at a Renoir, you can look at a Rubens, or you can look at a Picasso and see that there may have been some influence there. Not necessarily in style, but definitely an influence. How many of you know where Hearns Crossroads is? How many of you have ever seen this painting before? Absolutely. And we believe that person right there may be our illustrious president, who was attending the auction with his mother. And I don't mean Barack, I mean Ned. Again, tour de force, master of the brush, master of the human form, wonderful structure and control of light, palette knife here in the trees, just a great painting. He also did animals. I think it was a windy day, but very convincing. I would love to know the story behind this painting, because I know there had to be one. Something as sublime as a piece of wood, an old trunk of a tree, one that looks like it's been in a sawmill with a vine going across it, caught his attention, and he saw the beauty in it, and he wanted to capture that moment in time. And he did a spectacular job with the palette, showing that rough-hewn texture, and also the natural texture of the wood. This painting, it's a wonderful painting. I was telling Ned the other day, I said, I wish it had hit me earlier. How many of you are familiar with the Rousseau painting of all the animals in the jungle? Yeah, they kind of, I think maybe it's the ferns or whatever, but it kind of harkens back to that in my mind. Wonderful peonies that he did. Water lilies. I think we've seen those before. Can you hear me? Water lilies. Definitely an influence. With Manet. Truett Farm. And remember earlier I said we were looking at the Carey Farm and to pay attention to the corn shop. Hank did a whole series of paintings in the fall with the corn shops and the cornfields. This would have been the eastern side of the Truett Farm going into Pratt Pond. This is the western side. Look at the dirt. And look at how the stubble and how it's just magnificent the way he has achieved this. This is one of those you just want to stand back and just look. And just try to take it all in. Hank also was very concerned about how his paintings were portrayed with the frame. And in most cases would pick out the frame to go with the painting. When I was talking to Helen, we were talking about a relationship that Hank had established with the Horners when they had the Dutch Inn. And the Horners had arranged and gave Hank the opportunity to hang his work in there, and he could sell out of the restaurant, but at the same time, they had these wonderful paintings decorating the restaurant. And as a quick sideline, I can remember as a young child, going in there with my parents, and every time we'd go in, I'd ask them to sit at different places. I wanted to be closer to the paintings and Karen Touched a few, believe me. Beautiful. Look at the way.
I don't know.
How could anybody make one corn stalk so prevalent in a painting and so commanding? Hank Progar could. Any ideas on the farm? Lynn, Jesse, anyone else? This is another one that's not identified. Let's go. There's a typical Henry Progar signature, but I also wanted to show you, look at the paint. Look how the paint was mixed on the canvas, how it was applied, how it was built up to give you that. Another masterful work. Masterful in the way that he was able to tell a story here. You can see the crows come flying in, and you can see that they're in the wagon eating on the corn that's already been picked. With the use of the light and also the use of the composition. And we're going to do a little further exploration of this painting. There's the influence, in my opinion, Van Gogh with the heavy costume. That's one of the details from the painting. The crows, they're having a feast. One's joining them here. But just the build-up, the different textures here. He would have used an entirely different palette knife here than he would have here. And that shows you how the paint is just masterfully conceived and mixed on the palette, but also on the painting itself. Showing the highlight. You need to understand that's the highlight and the shadow in one stroke of the palette knife. Now we're going to enter, I think, to be Hank's most favorite subject matter, that of trust and palm. This is one of my personal favorite paintings of the ones we've seen here, and I think it's because of the way he was able to depict the water. The placidity of the pond, but then you had the rushing of the brook, and the foaming of the water, and the movement of the water. Tour de force. Look at the reflections in this one. Here. The texture of the trees, the use of the light. This subject matter right here is as important as that person in the boat. It commands the same amount of attention. Another trusting scene. Beautiful scene of a boat skip pulled up on the shore, showing the different textures and the use of the light. You can see the light cascading on the bottoms of the trunks of the cypress. You can see the rays of light beams coming through. Guys, I'm going to tell you, that is not easy to do, and by any stretch of the imagination. Look at the clarity, the pristine nature of this painting. Doesn't need leaves in the trees, just as commanding without them. You have open water, you have frozen water, you have snow. If you notice, it's the same scene, 2 different seasons. Still has the diving board, jumped off that a few times. Most of us have. Just down around the corner of the pond, 2 young girls out fishing in a boat, all done in palette knife. I mean, the use, that one piece of driftwood just really draws my attention. It's the same way, but look at the depth. You can almost see down into the water. You can see the pond grass in the water. Those aren't reflections. That's the pond grass from underneath these lily pads. Such attention to detail. iconic Progar. Very reminiscent of Trap Pond with the boats. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our tour, the retrospective of the work of Henry Progar. Thank you.
May we have the lights on, please? Tammy, Mike, and Helen, would you mind joining me in the back, please? We at this time cannot thank you people enough, Mr. Progar. And they've flown here this evening from Texas to make this presentation. And to make the process legal,
Always requires a signature.
always requires a signature. So Mike, at this time, is signing over our official deed of gift to the Historical Society. And while he's doing that, we have a few little goodies here. Helen and Frank, thank you for coming tonight. But more especially, thank you for sharing this fabulous archive of family paintings. A good many of these were Helen, and she opened up her home and her heart to us. Thank you. Are you sure you signed it? All right. And here to you too as well. Hopefully you'll find some memories of Laurel inside these bags. One of which is the DVD of Laurel's 1941 Harvest Festival. This occurred just a few weeks before the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and it captured an idyllic Laurel. And from what we best understand, Helen's father was instrumental through the Chamber of Commerce in seeing that this movie was filmed. And then her brother actually gave this to us sometime later. So if you have a chance, check it out. So for the big moment, what do you say we look at Henry Progar's Trap Pond, Truss and Pond?
Give this painting back to the town of Laurel, Delaware. I was only a resident for 18 years. And through the grace of God, Jim and Gloria Reagan kind of stepped into my life, even though I had wonderful parents, John and Florence Posky, and 8 brothers and sisters, who were having a family reunion tomorrow at Chickberry Farm. The Reagans kind of steered me in the right direction, told me what I needed to do, opened up their home to me in 1961 when I was 7 years old, and raised me like their own. Converted to Catholicism. I went on every summer trip with them, Easter vacations, and there's nothing they wouldn't do for us. And to this day, Tammy and I will spend a week a year with Gloria Reagan. Jim passed away a little over a year ago. But heart of gold. I mean, I had wonderful parents, but I was lucky I had 2 sets of parents. So this painting is donated. It was left to me 4 years ago. They asked us to come to Florida to help them downsize and relocate. But they specified that we needed to drive and bring our SUV. And they said, we'd like you to take back the things that are in our will. And I didn't know I was getting a Henry Progar painting. But over the years, they purchased one for each of their children, which included me. And so I think I could go home in the evening with a glass of wine, sit in my recliner, and look at this painting above the fireplace. It just didn't feel right. It didn't need to be in Austin, Texas. It needed to be back home in Laurel. So it's our pleasure to turn this painting over to you, and we appreciate it.
Thank you, Tim.